Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. My name is Amir. Got Martel on the podcast today. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And we have a special guest once again for everybody. We have Theo Dorsey from ESPN West Palm. How are you doing today, Theo?
I'm doing great, man. It never feels good to be, talking Heat basketball, like less than 12 hours removed from a brutal loss to the Celtics. But outside of that, hopeful for the future here, huh?
For sure. I know that was a rough game, which we'll get into in a little bit. But before we get started, though, do you want to let the audience know a little bit more about yourself and where they can find you online?
Yeah, man. So I'm from Houston, Texas. Originally, I've been here in West Palm Beach for the past, I want to say, 4 years and some change. I'm the host of Theoretically Speaking, which is on ESPN 106.3 FM. So if you're in Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast in South Florida, that's how you can catch it on your FM dial. If you're anywhere else in the world, ESPN app, just go to Listen Live in West Palm, and that's how you can get to us. We start at 2 o'clock. We also stream live on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, as well as we get a lot of our stuff up on Instagram as well. So at ESPN West Palm, at Theo Dorsey TV, that's how you can lock in with us. And I am the last bastion of Heat culture on the airwaves at ESPN West Palm right now because we were talking before this, Amir. We got so many transplants in the office. Even myself, I'm a transplant. I just so happen to be a Heat fan. So I'm holding it down for the culture here.
No, were you a Heat fan before, like while you lived in Houston? Also,
Yeah, growing up, I was a Shaq fan as a kid, and when the trade happened and Shaq went from the Lakers to the Heat, I forget how old I actually was, about 9 or 10 years old. I went with Shaq, and I like to say I stayed for Wade, and here I am now, what 20 some odd years later, Heat lifer. I won't count those days beforehand when I have my Lakers pom poms rooting for the big fella.
I'm like an anti-Laker fan. Martel knows this. The audience knows this. So I hated Shaq. But in '04, Wade's second year when we acquired him for Karan and Lamar, I was still ecstatic. I mean, like I knew basketball. I knew it was good for our organization. I knew it was going to be good for Dwayne Wade. And we ultimately won a championship. Should have gone to the finals the first year they were together. Obviously, we lost to the Pistons in 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think Dwayne Wade had some sort of injury. We talked about that offline too, right? That like every NBA finals typically is impacted by injuries, but that's neither here nor there. So, Theo, we wanted to bring you on to talk about Jimmy Butler and the current outlook of this Miami Heat team. So, the Jimmy Butler era has ended officially for the Miami Heat. It's not off to a really great start. Considering the games since he's been actually officially traded, right? So, the 2 games that he's been gone for, we've lost to the Brooklyn Nets, where we scored 86 points, which was a season low, and one of our worst offensive games of the year. And how do we top that off? Because usually our mantra is bounce back, right? Bam, Spo, they always like to say we're going to bounce back. Well, then we saw the loss last night to the Boston Celtics, where we scored 85 points and actually beat that mark and scored less. So, yes, Tyler Herro was out. Jaime was out. We had 3 new additions to the team. But the Boston Celtics were on the road. They had 2 of their starters out. So no big excuses. So we can get into the game in a second, but I want to talk a little more about just your opinion on just the whole Jimmy Butler saga, just how you think it went down, like kind of who's at fault, like who do you think was more on the right? Just like what's your whole perspective on the whole Jimmy Butler saga before we get into
It's one. I think it is one of those things that we have to handle this with a bit more context and a less emotion as Heat fans. I have a sour taste in my mouth for the fans, and y'all might be a couple of them. I won't blame you for it here today, but the fans who have now been ridiculing or wishing poorly on Jimmy Butler because of the way in which he exited, as if number one, we haven't seen Jimmy do this before with other franchises. It's not like he's doing this to the Heat and it's a Heat specific thing. Number two, we know who we have in the front office and Pat Riley, who is so stubborn that he got into a war of words and actions with our own in Dwayne Wade and LeBron and Zoe, right? Like he has a long history of these things as well. And then also on top of all of that, I'll never forget where we were when the Jimmy Butler trade happened. and the rest of America is laughing at us. They're talking about how Jimmy is going to retire away in South Florida. The Heat, who wanted all of these stars, end up with a castaway in Jimmy. And the next 5 years were like anything but that. Like, with the finals appearances, with the playoff Jimmy moments, with even with the hope and optimism that he kept reinstilling in the young guys with the Heat, as well as the fan base. Like, I still have to hold on to those good moments and not think about it as negatively in the way that he exited, because I kind of saw it coming when you have Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler. And then also, I'm not mad at a guy for just wanting his money and wanting a place to be long term. I hate how he did it, but I got to be appreciative of the last 5 years and hopeful that Spo and Pat and Mickey can actually make something good. They've shown us before, right? Let's retool this thing again and put some promising pieces together and make something happen. Khalil Ware looks great. I want to see what Andrew Wiggins looks like with Coach Spo. The length, right? The athleticism, the potential there. And then the question is going to be, what are we able to do over these next couple of off seasons, man?
Yeah, but Theo, don't you think, because we can look at both sides, but just from the Jimmy Butler perspective alone, they didn't necessarily say they wouldn't pay Jimmy. All Pat Riley would say is, listen, just play out the regular season. We also have to, think about the new CBA. He's missed a bunch of games in the past. I don't think necessarily, I mean, obviously, like the whole shut your mouth part, you know, was that called for? No. But then at the end of the day, when he got into a fight with Udonis Haslem, they were able to squash it really quick. So I can see it from both perspectives. I just think that all Jimmy had to do, if he would have just played out this season, he would have got his money. But you can't blame Pat Riley when, he quit on the team, when he said that, oh, well, it's not really about my teammates. It's never going to be about the teammates. But then you see him in the huddle, he's disengaged. He's not talking to his teammates. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, one-legged threes. I just think that he could have played out the regular season. But my
Yep.
question to you is, do you think they got Jimmy Butler enough help when you factor in, Tyler breaking his hand, Victor Oladipo's season-ending injury? Then you had, BBL Lowry, who, he had great moments. Dragic and Bam were hurt like in the bubble. So what do you think about the Miami Heat? Did they get him enough help while he was
I,
here?
Clearly not. Clearly not. And I think that we also became victims of our own success because Eric Spoelstra is such a maniacal genius, and because Jimmy Butler is such a he's really a ceiling and a floor raiser when he's playing at his best. They were able to squeeze a lot out of a roster that probably needed a little more juice if we were going to actually contend for and win a championship. Like, we talked about how y'all went to the playoff series and watched them against the Celtics last year, obviously with Jimmy not there. I was there for the NBA Finals when we ran into that buzzsaw that was the Nuggets. And it was clear from the tip until the end of that series that the Heat simply did not have the star power offensively and really the defensive versatility to be able to compete with a team like that. So I don't want to call it a failure on the behalf of the front office of the Miami Heat over the past 5 years because they didn't get Jimmy enough around the edges, because it still feels like we're only calling it a failure because Jimmy and Spo and Herro and Bam and like you said, all those ancillary pieces as well, they outperformed our expectations in a way that rose the standard. So that's a tough call. Now back to what you said about Jimmy though in the exit. I will say this. If you're Jimmy Butler, why would you have faith that the front office for the Miami Heat would make good and give you an extension at the end of the year as long as you just played your way through this season if you watch them turn their back on their only begotten son, Dwayne Wade? Like, and that's your dog. That's your Marquette homie. Like, you watched it happen to him, and this is Wade County. What makes you think they owe you anything when you haven't even delivered them a championship too?
But look, but then also too, but it's like, look, Jimmy Butler said that they allowed me to be me. Okay, they gave Jimmy Butler all the perks and all the privileges. And I think that you're right, because you can't really trust, the billionaires to really pay you. But like I said, I just think that all he had to do was play. I mean, we are all Miami Heat fans. We sit back and we see that Jimmy Butler, he half-asses it sometimes.
Yes,
And I
sometimes.
just okay, and now that's me being generous. But think about it.
Yeah.
The Miami Heat spoke to Jimmy Butler behind closed doors with his agent and said, "Hey, listen, we need you to play more games." When they didn't do that, that's when Pat came out and then told him, he should shut his mouth and he should be available. So I mean, I can't necessarily blame Pat when they gave him his money. They gave him what, like $150 million after the bubble. They've given
And he
him
made
perks.
good on
They've
that. He made good on that contract.
Exactly. And next season, he would have opted into $52 million. So from the perspective and actually him saying it himself that the Miami Heat have allowed me to be me, you would think that he would play out his contract. You know what I'm saying? Of course, now Pat Riley, I would say it's maybe about an 80% blame on him and 20% on Jimmy. I just think that he quit on the fans and he quit on the team by going out like that.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's ugly. It's never good when you quit on your team, on your brothers. It's also never good when you quit on the fans. But I will say, like, his brothers are never going to knock him for seeking out more long-term financial stability. You're never going to look at your other guy in the locker room and question him seeking after money. I try not to as a fan or even as a sports talker myself either. The one issue I have is if you're a Heat fan, if you're a Heat player, even if you're in the Heat front office and you're like, no, Jimmy, I want you to stay. I want you to play out this year, and I want to give you a long-term extension or at least a through the end of your career extension to stay here and play. Who believes that the Heat were ever going to do what the ultimate goal is, and that's actually win an NBA title with Jimmy Butler on a long-term extension, a max contract? Like, I don't. Jimmy might. I don't think Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, even himself, or Mickey Ayers, I don't think any of them think so. And I want to ask you, like Martell, Amir, do y'all think that letting him play out the contract in the best of the circumstances, maybe relationships were mended, do you think that he were going to ever be able to contend or build an actual championship winner around Jimmy at 36 years old?
No, definitely not. Not after they missed out on Damian Lillard. So that's
Yeah, it's over with.
That's a whole different story right there. But they didn't have enough to compete this year or next. I think the writing was on the wall. Jimmy Butler load manages in games, as Martel would like to say. Not only does he miss games, load manages, but he also takes time off during games where he's shooting under 10 field goal attempts. He's not playmaking. He's playing off ball, not like he did against the Pelicans and the Pacers right before he got his first suspension, where he's literally standing in the corner. But you could see his usage was down. His free throws were down. His rim pressure was down. So the writing was on the wall. And I kind of agree with Martel, though. Just like, hey, if you can actually sustain a full season where you're putting in the actual effort, you're not doing that load management, you're not missing 25 plus games. If you can just try hard, essentially, and help us avoid the play-in to give us an easier path to have a chance, because you never know what happens in the playoffs. Like for the Celtics, we were talking about offline, they had one of the easiest championship runs. They still won the championship. They're still the best team.
Yeah.
They're historically good on offense. Offensive rating, they're top. Defensive rating, they're top. Like, I still think they would have won, but you played no Jimmy, no Terry Rozier first round. Then Donovan Mitchell misses a few games. Then Halliburton misses a few games. Then Luka's banged up like in the finals. So like there's so many injuries they can use that for, but I just don't think we would have competed. But also I think that Pat would have hypothetically possibly gave Jimmy that one more deal on that extension if he could prove that he was available, right? That's like part of it. But they didn't have enough. It was just saying like, hey, we need to put butts in seats. We'll be a play-in mediocre team, but like we still have a marquee player. I think they would have been okay with it, but
I don't like that. So that's what I think. That's where we might be, on different sides of the fence. I think as ugly as this Jimmy departure was, maybe it played out best for all parties, because now Jimmy gets to go out to the Bay and play with Steph Curry, who they talked about how opposite attract. They complement each other well because all the attention Steph gets, he's going to get a lot more spacing than he would have ever gotten in Miami. Yep. He also can grow old with Steph. Like, they're on the same timeline. Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro are in their primes now. Jimmy is on the other side of that. And on top of that, the Miami Heat now get to hit the reset button and maybe try to make something out of what this new formation is going to be. I would have hated to see us be a play-in team or a team that is bordering around the play-in area and having to face juggernaut teams like the Celtics in the first round on the road year after year after year. That's not a competitive way to go out if I'm Jimmy Butler or the Miami Heat. So I think maybe in a roundabout, ugly way, this was one of those like divorces where both sides should be throwing a divorce party. Like, let's pop some champagne.
It makes sense. No, I totally agree. Like, it's a soft kind of rebuild. It's not a full rebuild because we still have Tyler, who's an all-star, Bam, who's a former all-star. We have obviously Khalil Ware, Jovic. So we have some pieces where we can compete in the future, but we need to take a few steps back. You need to lose in order. In this day and age, you see the teams that are up and coming are the Rockets, the Grizzlies, the Thunder, who are bad teams, who obviously built their teams through good lottery picks. We haven't had a top 10 lottery pick since Justice Winslow. We failed in that draft. We've gotten a lot better since then, but we haven't had a top 5 pick since Dwayne Wade since 2023. Right? It's been 22 years.
Well, people forget
Beasley,
Michael Beasley. So as great as the Heat have been at drafting between like the numbers like 13 and 18 year after year, we missed like extremely poorly on both Justice Winslow and Michael Beasley, and that hurts you. That sets you back.
That does, for sure. But what doesn't, though, is if you do get good lottery picks, you draft well, you get some young pieces, then you actually, through either free agency or most likely a trade, like the Thunder's kind of formula, like the Rockets formula, they have Sengun and Green and Tari Eason and Jabari Smith, and then of course they add in the veterans like Van Fleet and Brooks, and look at them now. Like that could be a good formula for this Miami Heat team, where we're just like maybe a play-in team. Like we're not going to compete outside of the play-in, I don't think this year or next year. Get some good draft capital, and then free up some cap space, and then we rebuild. Like I think I agree with you on that sense that this was probably the best for both parties.
You know what I'm hoping? I'm hoping. I just want to say a quick thing as we're talking about dream futures for the Miami Heat. I threw this out with some Heat fans earlier this morning when I was at a video shoot. Just like we saw with Luka Doncic in the middle of the night with new ownership, trading their franchise superstar and face of their franchise. I'm holding out hope. Alex Rodriguez and them just took over in Minneapolis with the Timberwolves. I see where you're going.
Yep.
If there's one person that can exemplify Heat culture and be the proper heir apparent to Wade, Jimmy, insert player here, I would love Anthony Edwards with Spo, man. I mean, that's pipe dreams, but come on.
That's a must. That is a must. But speaking of the future, like what do you think about Tyler Herro this season, like as an all-star? But then also too, I mean, you were at Media Day. What is going on with Terry Rozier? Those are my 2 questions to you.
Terry, I mean, he has to be somehow affected or impacted by all of the gambling like situation stuff that has come out, right? But obviously he's been a shell of what you want Terry Rozier to be, so it's hard for me to actually fully dissect that. Also, what the heck were we expecting from Terry this year? I think he came in with the right mindset. He wants to compete, and you know he's one of those guys that is always going to be like another guy that exemplifies Heat culture. I could not diagnose it. I'm not even sure if the guys in the locker room could. As for Tyler Herro, I'm not even sure. This is the question I'll ask you then. Is this the best we're going to get from Tyler? Like, is this a peak year from Tyler? When we look back 20 years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, yeah, Tyler's best season with the Heat was the 2024-2025 season.
So that's the problem is, like, this is such a small sample size because, I mean, he's had good seasons, but then at the same time, you know, he would miss so many games. But he's like really carrying this team because think about it. We've pretty much had no Jimmy. Bam was struggling to start the season. Kind of to answer your Terry question, I just thought that Terry Rozier would bring better offense, especially for the nights where you don't have a Jimmy Butler. I thought that Terry Rozier would at least be able to give you like 15 to 18 points a night, you know, on good shooting and good numbers. But for him, he's out here taking step back threes, like right into the defender. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not even making IQ plays. He's missing layups. I don't see the Terry Rozier that I thought they would get from the offensive perspective. But in terms of Tyler, I mean, he is still young. People are saying that we should sell on him now because he's playing his best basketball. But like I said, it's a very small sample size.
Yeah, Terry Rozier, small guard, wrong side of 30. You know, like, isn't he? How old is Terry right now?
I think he
he's
might
30.
still be 29 or he just turned 30.
Right at 30. It just is one of those things where you never know when that thing is gonna. You know, you never know when. It's a depreciating, quote unquote, asset. I hate to talk about basketball players in that way, but yes, I don't know if leaning on Terry Rozier giving you 15 to 18 a night is a reliable thing for you to be wanting as a fan right now in 2025. Back to Tyler Herro, that's what I'm worried about. I love what he's giving this year. I'm just worried that if this is the best we're ever going to get from Tyler, as great of a scorer as he's been, he's what, 25th in the league in scoring, but he's our best offensive threat. It's not like he's gotten that much more efficient over what he did last year. He just is playing more minutes. Um, I just don't want the Heat to trap themselves into a position where somebody does become available and Tyler Hero is the number one asset that is requested, and that's what doesn't get a deal across the table. I want Hero to be a part of what the Heat have for the future. I don't think he should be untouchable. I think there should be one untouchable player that wears a Heat uniform right now, and that's Bam Adebayo. Khalil Ware would be a close second to me, and then I would put Tyler Hero after that. And Hero's an all-star, right? I'm just like, you can get that level of production. You can get what Hero is getting you out of many more players. What Bam and Khalil Ware provide, very few can do. So I don't know. The Hero thing is a tough one for me still, man. And I also don't want to be that guy that's throwing him back in the trade rumors. Like the dude has lived with that his whole life. We saw when the Heat fan the other day was breaking the Jimmy news. The inquisitive look on his face, you can tell he's like, oh my God, more trade news stuff. Like, I hate that for Hero, but he has played himself back into being a really good trade piece if the Heat can find a star that wants to move to South Florida.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned his efficiency. It was through the roof for the first half of the season, and we're
Yeah.
past the halfway point now. But to your point, that has kind of regressed back, not to the general mean because he's still shooting a career high in in 3-point percentage. He's like at 40%. But yeah, I don't know. Like looking to answer your question earlier, if we look back, would this be considered one of his best years? Possibly. Like, yes, for sure. Now, like he was pretty stagnant for a few seasons, and we thought this is what he is. This is who he is, right? He's a 20-point scorer. He's an okay ball handler. He's an okay 3-level scorer, but he has improved drastically this season, I think, as a 3-level scorer. He's put on some size. He's finishing at the rim. He's getting to the free throw line a little bit more, but I don't think he's a finished product. He's still 25. I don't want to compare him to Steph Curry, even though some people do, and Spo has probably tried to at times, trying to make sure his shot profile is similar to Steph Curry's, right? Where it's mainly threes or layups, right? He's kind of eliminated the mid-range. Like he's been doing it a little bit more recently, but it's basically eliminated. He's basically eliminated the floater game, which I'm happy for. Even though he had really nice touch, he's gotten injured multiple times, landing on the big's feet, he's like landing on the trees. So
Right.
Steph Curry at 25 had ankle injuries at first, and it took him until 25 to get to his first All-Star. He had a different team, obviously, with Draymond and Thompson, and he had a way more spacing with Thompson too, right? So that Tyler doesn't have that duo right now. I think he still can improve, but he might be a finished product. I don't think he's going to get much better than where he's at right now.
Yeah.
And he can't be a 1A. He's our 1A right now, and we're a mediocre team. Like we'll be a play-in team, which is fine. He is still, in my opinion, probably a 3. You still want Bam as the 2. We need to find that number 1, whether it's through the draft. Maybe that's Khalil Ware. What's if Khalil Ware becomes who knows? But like
that'll be crazy.
That would be insane. But you need to find someone to be that 1. I think Tyler could maybe be like that 2B.
Yeah.
If he's playing like this and he improves, right? Maybe he could be a 2. He can't be your best player on the team. There's no chance.
The real question that the Heat have to ask themselves is the level of offensive productivity that Tyler Hero gives you at the 2 and the way that you have to build around him, because now you need two-way players at both positions surrounding him so that you can hide him a bit when it comes to the playoffs, right? Like I understand he's gotten better at being a defender and not being picked on and whatnot. He still is a bit undersized, not as athletic as some of the faster and bigger and more explosive guards. It's going to be hard for him to guard in the postseason. I just wonder, again, it's never a knock on Tyler Hero and what he's able to provide for the Heat. I think he's really good. He's a really good scorer and whatnot. It's just, can you find replaceable level talent that Tyler Hero provides you while still getting you a plus level defender? And you're right. He'll be better as a number 2 or a number 3 offensively. He's our number 1 right now. What he's dropping, I went and looked his stats up so I can get it right. 23.7 points per game now. I think that has dropped a little bit. And he's shooting 38.8. 38.8 from behind the arc, which is pretty status quo for what he's done his whole career. It's just like, yeah, you can't invoke the name Steph Curry when you're not even getting above the 40-point threshold. Like, there's levels. There's levels to it, man. I do. I think part of the problem is I love the Tyler Hero evolution as a person, as a character. Like, I love the maturity that he even showed coming into this year. I'm concerned about making him an untouchable asset if you're trying to actually compete for championships because he can't be your number one scorer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against him being the number one scorer. I just don't want to be the number one option. I don't want him to be our number one. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
overall versus
Yeah.
score, that's fine. Maybe he could be the number one scorer or the number two scorer, but he can't be your number one overall best player. Bam is probably, in the treading in the right direction finally now that Kalal has been starting. He's been playing
Yeah.
a lot better.
It's
He had a
helping.
really, really bad start to the season. So I think Bam is still our best overall player, obviously, because he's still one of the top defensive players in the NBA. And obviously you can see that he's becoming a little more efficient with the scoring, a little more confident. I think he's hit a 3 in like 6 games straight now. I don't want that streak to continue because I don't need Bam to be shooting more threes. Like maybe he can surpass Tyler's streak that he broke, because Tyler has been on that downturn since being named an All-Star. I didn't know because I thought he was at 40%, and he was at 24 points per game. But the last week he's had some really bad games.
Yeah. I'm curious. What do y'all think realistically this offseason, the number one thing that could help the Heat's lineup, and who would be the players that you'd be willing to part with to get it? Because when I look at like, you don't need a Jimmy Butler level player to insert into this lineup to make them extremely good. But I do think that you need somebody who can be a number one option on offense that's not a minus on defense if you're going to stick with Hero. And there's not a lot, but there are wings in this league that could fill that void if they become available. I'm just curious for y'all, who are some of those names that you would love to see in a Heat uniform, and who would you be willing to part with to get them here?
So before we look at the wings, though, this Miami Heat team needs a playmaking point guard desperately. And I'll actually throw this back at you. What do you think about Trae Young? I mean, Trae Young, he's 20 and 10. I know that his defense is not the best, but I just think that, like with the Miami Heat team that has a terrible offense, Trae Young would definitely help this Miami Heat team, especially if he made guys like Clint Capella look good. Can you imagine him throwing lobs to Ware?
Yeah, that's the key. I would love Trae Young, but I do think that would kind of relegate Tyler Hero to probably be in part of that trade package. I don't know how especially in a playoff series, I don't know how you would go into it starting Tyler Hero and Trae Young. Imagine the Celtics would have a field day with the Heat if we tried to do that. I was hoping for De'Aaron Fox before the deadline. Like, I think he would have been the perfect explosive guard. And I do think that, you're right, Amir Martell, we talk about wanting Bam and Khalil Ware to uptick a little bit offensively and be more of a primary option. To unlock them more, you get a guard that's really good at, entry touches, but most importantly, like, getting lobs up to those guys. That first game, I believe it was not the Celtics game, but the game before that, we opened it up first 3 or 4 minutes of like 2 or 3 different lobs to Bam and Khalil Ware. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's what I would love to see right now. If you got a guy that can do that consistently like a Trae Young, yeah, we're talking about a level of efficiency that this offense can add to it. And then you use the mastermind that is Spo and he builds around that. I would be excited to see what that looks like. But Tyler's got to go if you're getting Trae Young, right?
For sure. But I also agree with Martin. I mean, that would be ideal to get like an all-star level type of point guard playmaker. Because right now, Tyler is getting double teamed. He's getting blitzed. They're not playing drop coverage on him. Like, there's no other ball handler because Terry Rozier is not doing that. He's not finishing. He's getting to the rim, but I don't even know what his percentages are, but they're horrendous. He cannot finish at the rim if his life depended on it. So we need, like, even if we got like a DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine guy next to Tyler, they wouldn't be able to blitz him like that because he could distribute. He's a really good playmaker. Like, he gets rid of the ball quickly, but the defenses don't honor that person because they're not going to break down and dribble penetrate and get to the basket. So right now they're blitzing, double teaming him. There's a stat where I think they don't switch on the pick and roll against Tyler Herro the most in the NBA. Like, there's no switch. They both just stay, right? And so, like, that's also crediting why Tyler's percentages might be going down, and give him more credit for being that focal point. Like, they are literally scouting him specifically, trying to get him off of his game. So I think I agree with Martel. Fox I wanted badly this year, or just in general, but a Fox type guy, a Trae Young type guy. If not, give me a Tyus Jones type of guy who has a really good assist to turnover ratio, who can be an actual floor general, because there's like none left. They're all scoring point guards now at this point, right? Like Steph, like Fox, like Trae. I think just getting a actual like Chris Paul type of playmate, not Chris Paul specifically because he's freaking old, but I think that type of guy could be really good next to Tyler Herro, so he can play a little more off ball as well. But anyway, Theo, I know we're at time, so I know you have to head out. So any last thoughts that you want to bring up? Otherwise, if you want to let the audience know one more time where they can find your work.
I'll say this. I'm glad that we did not fully turn our backs on Heat culture and storming like the Mavericks fans have been doing when they lost their superstar. I'm glad that the Heat were obviously different scenarios, but more supportive of our retooling. And good luck, especially if we get somebody else in that house. Good luck trying to score on a front court that looks like Wiggins, Khalil Ware, and Bam Adebayo in the playoffs. That's just a shout to the Eastern Conference teams that might have to put up with us. You can find Theoretically Speaking, though, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, ESPN West Palm. Stream us live. Check us out at ESPN West Palm or at Theo Dorsey TV. And Amir, Martel, appreciate y'all having me on. And I'm just hopeful that, again, like, what are we, the 7th seed right now?
Yep.
Just stay out of the play-in and I'll be happy. We're in striking distance to keeping that going. I think we fell back with the game against the Celtics, but the Thunder ain't gonna make it no easier.
But if we get the 8th seed, I think we get a better pick, and we still get to keep those protected lottery picks. So maybe it might be better with the 8th seed and make it to the playoffs versus the 6th seed. I don't know. That could help maybe. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make a difference because we're gonna lose in the first round anyway. It's a young team, so.
I got crucified last year for rooting for the Heat to not make the playoffs, for both the protection from, again, I don't want to be a part of the championship ring that the Celtics have. We are now forever etched into that 2024 ring. But also, I was hoping that we would get a better draft pick. But what they've shown me is they're really good at striking right there in the middle of the draft anyway. So what's the difference between 12 and 17 when your scouting is that good and you end up with a guy like Khalil Ware? Remember when they wanted us to get, like, who was it, Dalton Connect or something like that over Khalil?
He fell.
They look foolish.
He was supposed to be top 12 or so, or top 10 even. I think it was kind of like, what's his name, who fell too, Cam Whitmore, who went to the Rockets.
Cam, yeah.
He was supposed to be a top 10 guy, and then, they said injuries, and it's just like something about his personality or immaturity or something. And look at him, man. He's barely getting any minutes, and he looks really good too. Over Jaime now, I think that we can talk about that on the next episode because he's in that sophomore slump. But
right, but what I'll say is this: I trust their decision making, and I won't question that any further, especially when it comes to drafting in the middle of the first round. I would like to see us have a shot at upsetting when they see, like, you get the 6 or the 5 seed. I feel more comfortable about it. You fall into that play-in, I would hate again to be fodder for the Celtics. That would just, oof. Imagine they repeat and we're on the ring again. Like, I would cry myself to sleep every night.
Last thing, would you rather have the Knicks or the Celtics? Because I hate the Knicks more than the Celtics, I think. Because of historic circumstances, of course.
I would rather, you know what? Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what, though? I would rather it be the Knicks, because if the Heat lost to the Celtics in back-to-back years en route to them potentially repeating, like, you're never hearing the end of that. And the rivalry with this Celtics team is greater than the current Heat rivalry with the Knicks team, whereas that's more so dating back to the 90s. Like, Pat Riley would be untamable, but I don't think it's the play. Like, who hates Jalen Brunson as a Heat fan? Not that much,
I do.
I mean, come on. But
he's so good. I love him. I loved him on Dallas. You're on the Knicks. I hate you.
I feel you. But I'm just saying, there's real reasons to hate Tatum and Brown and Derek White and stuff. Like, we have data points. But Jalen Brunson is just like, yeah, you have a Knicks uniform on.
And he's good.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Anyway, Theo, thank you so much. I know we're over time. Appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully we can have you back on for another episode in the future, but we appreciate it.
For sure, man. I'll stay locked in, and appreciate y'all having me on. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.